Setting the stage for a confirmation fight, the showdown over Judge Brett Kavanaugh's nomination is heating up as some Senate Democrats vow to block President Trump's Supreme Court pick.
Judge Kavanaugh, you should not be serving in this building as a Supreme Court justice.
His views are outside the mainstream, and there's every reason to believe he would overturn Roe.
Now is the time to demand a justice who will protect our health care, not strike it down. Now is the time to fight.
Here now is South Dakota Senator John Thune, Senate Republican Conference Chairman. Sir, I would ask you, what does the vote count look like right now? Do Republicans have the votes to get this done?
Well, it's a little early to say, Melissa. We hope we will. We expect that we will, but it's a process, and this is the beginning of the process. Our members want a chance to sit down with Judge Kavanaugh, meet him, ask him some questions. They want to listen to the hearings at the Judiciary Committee and to the debate that will happen eventually on the Senate floor. But I think in the end, this is a nominee who has the potential to really unify Republicans and hopefully attract some Democrats as well.
If you had to summarize, what were some of the concerns coming from the Republican group, what would you say that they are, or what questions might they ask?
Well, I think Republicans are going to be interested in judicial philosophy, temperament, and his writings. He's had a series of rulings. He's written 300 or so opinions on the D.C. Circuit, which is the busiest circuit court in the country. And so a lot of our members are going to want to examine those and figure out kind of what his judicial philosophy is. And one of the issues that's really important to a lot of Republican senators is he a judge who is going to pay deference to executive branch or administrative agency actions, or is he somebody who is going to follow the law and the Constitution? And obviously, most of our Republican senators side with a jurist, somebody who literally is going to apply the law and the Constitution in a fair and even-handed manner, and not try to make policy or to legislate from the bench or to allow executive branch agencies to have too much authority, that power that the Congress should be using.
It seems like from people who have looked at his record that he doesn't defer to the bureaucracy, and that's one of the things that that they like about him, except for, we just had Rand Paul's picture up, and except for in the case of the NSA, he has been more lenient about how the court looks at what the NSA is doing and their powers. Does that give you pause, and do you think that'll be one of the questions?
Well, I'm sure it'll be a question. That's an issue that Senator Paul typically asks of judges or other nominees that come before Congress, and so it'll be important to him and perhaps to other senators as well. But again, these are the reasons why you have this process. This is why you have the documents prepared. You look at all those opinions, you look at his writings, and you determine from his record whether he possesses the judicial philosophy and exercises the kind of temperament that most of us want to see on the court, which is somebody, again, who calls balls and strikes, somebody who doesn't try to step on the scales or take sides or try to achieve a certain outcome, a political outcome, somebody literally who is there to be an impartial judge, and that's what I think most of our members are looking at. But these issues with administrative agencies, I'm sure, will come up.
Have you had a chance to talk to him yet yourself?
I have not. I expect he's making the rounds right now. I'm sure I will meet with him, and I look forward to that. He obviously
Can you give us a hint how you would phrase your question?
Well, I mean, I think I would be interested in knowing, along the lines of what the way I've just said, in terms of how does he view the role of the courts relative to the executive branch and agencies that issue regulations, and is he going to be deferential to them, or is he going to instead apply the law and the Constitution? And I think that, to me, is a way that we'll approach this. But I'm interested in hearing from him, directly from his mouth, what his judicial philosophy is, and what does he view the role of a judge in our system of government.
Real quick, I'm sure you've heard the conspiracy theories that this is President Trump's get-out-of-jail-free card, that he is deferential to the executive branch. It's a little bit of what it sounded like you were saying a little bit there, or wondering, are you going to ask that question, or do you think that's just a conspiracy theory?
Well, I think that's something that my understanding is that opinion, or that at least writing, came in 2009 when President Obama was in the White House. The Democrats are becoming very theatrical about this nomination, as we expected them to be. But honestly, that's an issue that I don't believe anybody is going to take very seriously.
Senator Thune, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. We got to run. Thank you.